Wunder.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to podcast number 2 of Wunder Wisdom. I am with Scott Patton, and this is Tuesday, April 20th.
20th, it is indeed.
2021. All day, I've heard.
All day.
So today, I believe you and I, it was yesterday that we chatted a little bit what we wanted to accomplish today, and that was to talk about your latest venture, and that is your latest gut health webinar. And a portion of that, you talked about digestion. And so we wanted to kind of grow this into an area of, what is it that we're digesting now? What are we consuming? And so today is going to be on all levels. We're going to talk about the physical, but we're also going to layer that with the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual overlay and kind of what's happening today. And I don't know about you, but here's what I'm noticing about people as I, go out and run errands or hang out with my friends wherever I go, where we can, of course, within the legal limits, you understand. People are in one of two camps, I'm finding, and people either look resigned, kind of beaten down, or they're angry and resentful. And I get that, because one day I'm beaten down and the next day I'm angry. I'm resentful about all the restrictions that just keep piling on, apparently because there's some number growth somewhere. While people are going out of business and losing money hand over fist, which is a real probability in people's lives. So you and I do this because if we've got ideas that can help people feel better, provide a different perspective to understand maybe what's going on, there might be something here that will improve these feelings of being overwhelmed, angry, or whatever people are feeling. It's a general anxiety. It's that overwhelmment that just doesn't seem to go away, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite slides that I did in my webinar was looking at the Polyvagal Theory, and basically what it showed was when you don't feel connected to the world, there becomes this kind of sense of threat that you feel, and there are really two responses that we have to threat. And what I covered was threat doesn't have to be someone just attacking you,
right?
But it can also be, my government isn't allowing me to do anything at this point.
I have no money to feed my family. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I have no business now. That one out, right? There are so many kind of reasons right now to feel threat. Mm-hmm. And our two responses are essentially let's call it the anger response.
Yep.
And that's where you really use up a lot of energy. And it's the kind of the fight or flight response. It's the one that says, we're in danger. We need to move. We need to get away from the spot to a place of safety. The other less evolved, more primitive response we have is that shutdown response. And that's when, when we say things like paralyzed with fear. And so what you're saying is basically exactly simply how we respond to really dangerous situations. And like you outlined, right now it's a really pressing time because there are people who genuinely are losing money hand over fist or don't have any money. And this kind of sad reality is in these days and times, that's how we buy food for ourselves. That's how we clothe ourselves. That's, without money, it's really hard to live in our society. So I think when we're seeing,
in other words, Scott, we survive.
Yeah, exactly. We're put in this survival mode. So as you're seeing this with other people and we're experiencing it as well, it's the natural response to something which just seems so overwhelming. So it's really fascinating how that ties in so much with the overall kind of discussion about gut health and what we're consuming. It's not just food stuff, but what we're kind of overall digestion consuming. That can also be the kind of emotional as well, which plays just as much of a role in our digestion.
Absolutely. So before we get into that, as always, my learning is timely, as is yours. Mm-hmm. And I was very kindly given a book yesterday. A friend of mine bought it for me. He recommended it. It's Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness. And I checked the copyright. So 2017. So not 2020, not 2021, but and the reason I was looking away a moment ago, and I was listening to you, but I want to read this part about what's been going on, and you'll see it's ominously close to what we're experiencing now, which I find interesting. Okay, so Brene talks about one of the most well-respected researchers in the area of face-to-face contact. Her name is Susan Pinker, and she wrote a book called The Village Effect: How Face-to-Face Contact Can Make Us Healthier and Happier. Pinker writes, in a short evolutionary time, sorry, I guess I should look at the screen, we have changed from group living primates skilled at reading each other's every gesture and intention to a solitary species, each one of us preoccupied with our own screen. Based on studies across diverse fields, Pinker concludes that there is no substitute for in-person interactions. They are proven to bolster our immune system and send positive hormones surging through our bloodstream and brain and help us live longer. Pinker adds, I call this building your village, and building is a matter of life or death. Now, when she says life or death, she's not kidding. Brene Brown writes, it turns out that everything she's learned complements what we read about loneliness. Social interaction makes us live longer, healthier lives by a lot. Pinker writes, in fact, neglecting to keep in close contact with people who are important to you is at least as dangerous to your health as a pack-a-day cigarette habit, hypertension, and obesity. The good news is that this contact doesn't have to be a long, close interaction, though that's nice. Making eye contact, shaking someone's hand, or giving someone a high five lowers your cortisol levels and releases dopamine, making you less stressed and providing a little chemical boost. Pinker writes, research shows that playing cards once a week or meeting friends every Wednesday night at Starbucks adds as many years to your lives as taking beta blockers or quitting a pack-a-day smoking habit. Social media is great for developing community, but for true belonging, real connection and real empathy require meeting real people in real space in real time. Holy cow. This was obviously 2017 and before. And look what's happening. Look what's happening now. I mean, we've gone further down that rabbit hole in terms of separation. Honestly, for anybody who has been struggling, this braving the wilderness is such an amazing contribution to, here's why we're stuck in our silos. Here's why we're angry. Here's why we're taking pot shots at other people who aren't wearing the masks or aren't taking the proper precautions. And it all has to do with our wiring and our biology. It's so interesting.
Yeah. It's, as I referenced, the Polyvagal Theory is a whole theory about humans as in the social engagement and the physiology behind that. And when you first come across something like loneliness is as bad as a pack a day for smoking, that seems outrageous, but it's actually quite simple to understand. And again, it's literally just has to do with the fact that as a human being, we have, let's say, limited energy in the body. And again, when we feel threat for any reason, we have to defend ourselves.
Right.
And so the kind of idea there is, well, what is threat? And then what are our cues of safety? What are the environments that we can be in when we're not experiencing threat, but we're genuinely feeling cared for, we're feeling loved, we're feeling safe? It's essentially, what are the states of being and what are the environments when we don't feel like we need to fight the external world? Right. Because if we don't need to fight the external world, all that energy can be used for the things that are necessary, like our health, and also things that we enjoy. And when you really start to think, you just have to think about your own life. What are the cues as mammals, as human beings, that provide us, ooh, this is a really good, safe environment? A lot of it has to do with our facial muscles and how we express to each other. Because just like they wrote in that book, we're always looking around, kind of not just us consciously, but our whole subconscious, our whole body. We're looking around to really discover, is this an environment that I can chill and relax in, or do I need to be on guard?
Am I safe? Safety and security is the issue we're talking here, right?
Exactly.
Psychological, physical safety.
Exactly. And it's, we don't want to make it so, brute and say it's all just about safety, but fundamentally, first and foremost, as I like to think, you can't really have a conversation about love, about kindness, about engagement if you're dead. Like once you're dead, there's nothing else to be had. So that's like the base
How do you
level you
know?
have to look after. Yeah, I assume so.
Okay.
I'm guessing. So you have to be alive to kind of to play the game. So that has to be the rule: stay alive. And that's why it's this. Our kind of bodies are based in, let's keep us alive so that we can continue the social engagement as human beings. And again, when we get those, let's call them cues of safety, feeling loved, cared for, genuinely having a nice conversation with a friend that feels like a good moment, that's when you can go, you can relax into the moment. All of your energy is now stored internally and it's used to grow, to restore. And what I've learned from the polyvagal theory is that essentially when we feel cared for and loved, the nerve, more or less, which controls that is the one which also interacts with our facial muscles and our intonation of voice. And again, you don't have to be a neuroscientist to figure this out. When someone is happy, how does their face move? How does their body move? And how do they speak? When someone is angry or scary, what does that look and sound like? So it's really interesting because when we're talking about being healthy, that means we're talking about your body being able to heal. And the question is, when does your body heal? Does it heal when someone is yelling at you because you were doing something wrong, like not wearing a mask? Or do you heal when you genuinely feel embraced, cared for, respected, and loved? And one of the coolest things for me is that even as cool as our neuroscience is now, I think we figured this out thousands and thousands of years ago when we started talking about things like love and respect, forgiveness, kindness.
When you were talking about tone of voice, or I had two things I thought of. One of them was I'm a singer, and so
Yeah.
When I'm nervous, I'm a speaker too, but I don't get as nervous because a lot more can go wrong when you're singing than you've
Totally.
experienced. It's very difficult to make a good sound when you're nervous, when
Yeah.
you're scared, when you're all of those the anxious nervousness, all of that. Very difficult to make a good sound. And really
Yeah.
it's about embracing the anxiety, turning it into something. And then I know very well that once I get going, then it flows. Once I'm into it, the dam breaks and away I go.
Yeah.
And it's also how I've coached athletes, and this from being a high level athlete, is that anxiety, nervousness before a game, even throwing up, a lot of athletes encounter that. It runs rampant and you can't perform. Your
Yeah.
body is not in that state of quiet readiness that you need it to be, because
Yeah.
you're busy being scared, and you tense up, and all of that happens. And so skill execution goes out the window, your endurance,
Yeah.
all of that. So it's really learning that fine line of performance, and that is being up enough. I've also noticed that when
Yeah.
I'm not nervous, I don't perform quite as well. I don't have that edge. So it's
Yeah.
interesting, hey? All of that kind of feeds in.
It's kind of like the yin yang, just on that point. When you're way too relaxed, it's like there's no energy moving and there's like the bus really isn't going. Or you're on the other side, there's too much energy moving and then it just can't be kind of channeled properly.
Well, you're
Like,
draining. You're draining energy, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to hear a cool fun fact? Ties in kind of perfectly with the intonation of voice. This again, I keep referencing polyvagal theory because it radically changed my life. And I think as we're talking about social engagement in human beings and healing, to me, it's the most foundational theory that we have. What I learned from Stephen Porges, the founder of it, if you were to find fossils, like just bones, you would know that they are a mammal because the middle ear bones will have broken off the jawbone. And we don't quite know what happened first, but essentially at one point in evolution, as our brains got bigger, it expanded our skull, and that caused the middle ear bones to break off our jawbone. Now, what happened is this allowed us to hear higher frequencies, which essentially help us to detect non-threat. So what that means is, how do you talk to an infant and how do you talk to an animal? Hi, hello, wow, right. That very motherly high pitch, that is a signal of safety. It's a cue of safety. The low rumbling, that's a cue of danger. So when we're actually talking about intonation of voice, and like you said, speaking, we're always picking up cues from our environment and other human beings. So let's say I show up to the hockey rink and I hear you talking and you're nervous and you're vocalizing that and you're nervous and you're kind of finding it hard to talk, immediately my body naturally is going to go, ooh, another beautiful, smart human being is nervous. Maybe I should be nervous too because something's going wrong
Something's
there.
off. Yeah.
Exactly. On the exact flip side, because again, we're always taking cues from our environment. If I show up and let's say you're speaking in that very kind of nurturing voice, it is that cue of safety for safety. And that means healing, and that means kind of the peak performance. And so it's all kind of one story when we're talking about social engagement, performance. Essentially, the way to break it down easy for me is, if you think of your energy like money, am I spending it fighting the external world, or can I actually use it and channel it inside myself? When we're engaging in beautiful conversations, that's when I feel the most kind of turned on internally, and that's when we heal. I think
there's
now,
a jazz to that. There's a jazz to doing what you love to do, feeling comfortable, feeling accepted, feeling relaxed, and yet excited about what it is that you're engaging in, right?
And in those states, that's when you have the most expression. Like it's literally expression of being. Again, that's not a new concept, but we know, like, neuroscientifically, just to throw in a big word to make it seem more legit, but from a neuroscience perspective, we vocalize more, our facial muscles move more, we're not frozen, we move freely. There's an expression of being which comes on when we're in that kind of safe, cared for, loved environment. And one of the, sad way to put it, but one of the ironic things going on right now is that we're literally preventing the expression of humanity. Yeah. And I don't want that to sound cheesy at all. We're literally being locked in a home, saying you can't move, you can't go outside, you can't see people's faces. We are literally preventing the expression of each individual human being. And I think we're playing with fire, because it's to say a clear connection doesn't even paint the picture. There is an exact overlay of expression of your being in your immune system and health. There's no debate about that. There's no woo-woo about that. Anyone who's probably taken high school biology should understand that the stress response shuts off the immune response, and that's how it's supposed to work. Therefore, non-stress, when you're in those beautiful expressive environments, that's when you can come alive, right? And so
totally true. And before we get to the actual how it works in the body, which I'm sure everyone wants to hear you talk about, it's hard to be loving and kind yourself when you're unhappy, stressed, sad, grieving, angry. We can't be our natural selves. And there's a ton of research that talks about how we are wired for connection. And there's a lot of research that talks about Darwin's theory about survival of the fittest. And he didn't mean to say this, but it's been extrapolated that we are soul beings and separate from one another, and that we're just meant to live in competition. And so whoever does that the best wins. That does not speak to us as human beings at all, or mammals, or whatever we are.
So it's quite a big task to take on when you're questioning Darwin, because he is like the poster boy of anything evolution. However, I think to open it up in kind of open concept, there are two they're kind of foundational concepts which never made sense to me with the Darwinian theory.
Right.
The first and foremost is when you study other animals, and then you derive rules for human beings. Mm-hmm. Human beings are a whole different breed, clearly. I'm pretty sure other animals don't have iPhones. Yeah, exactly. And just we're evolutionary, we're a very different species. So one, we have to be careful when we look at other animals and make rules for ourselves. Now, we are incredibly similar in many ways, but we're also clearly incredibly different. So maybe there's more to a story of that. Right. Number two, survival of the fittest. Fittest does not mean like strongest muscle-wise. When we say fit in the scientific term means your ability to adapt to your environment. Right? Like the one that can adapt best to the environment. So when you live on a global planet of 7 billion people, when we all rely on each other, it doesn't make sense to think that the one who can survive the best can cooperate the best. Inherently, the idea of cooperation means like you get the most out of everybody participating.
Right.
And I think that's about as basic as concept as you can have. Now, we have competition in the world for good reason, because it's sometimes really hard to find cooperative systems when you're dealing with large groups of people.
Right.
So competition kind of serves as a placeholder until you can include more people, because sometimes it's a hard system to figure out. But nonetheless.
Sorry, just on that point, Brene Brown
Sure.
in this book talks about our sorting process. So where we fit with other groups and what's going on in the world, we're constantly sorting where we fit. And again, it leads to big questions. Who am I and what am I doing here? Which some of us still haven't figured out later in life, but I won't say who that is.
Yeah, that one person. I think I've heard of them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, don't, mum's the word. Oops.
What I also find interesting for the people continuing to purport this kind of very competitive idea from Darwin, to think in this society, I guarantee that person woke up in a bed that they didn't make. They took a shower in a water system they didn't design nor build. They ate food, which they didn't get. I could literally for the rest of the podcast go on about things that they didn't contribute. People often look at capitalism as like an incredibly competitive system. And I don't want to really go down this rabbit hole, but at the same time, we need to realize that it is unbelievably reliant on other human beings. Like, yes, there is competition in it, no doubt, but it's super duper, duper, duper cooperative. That's why I can have so much in my life that I really don't contribute much to. Like, it's a really kind of reliant system. And so the idea of like, we're just living, like the way to survive is to be incredibly competitive. It just makes no sense on its surface. If you can cooperate, then you get the benefits of all the other people that are in the cooperative system. And I just want to finish up on this. You have in your human body about 50 trillion human cells. And the name of the game of it just, I know that's such a bizarre number. That's 50,000 billion.
But who counted those? I don't know.
How they actually figured. Yeah, they also,
because you only have 10 fingers. And
it was a lot of people over a long time. We started way back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah. But essentially, when it comes to actual health in the body, it all literally comes down to, can your cells communicate and cooperate? I know that sounds woo-woo and cheesy, but that's literally how it works.
It's a biological function. Your heart can't operate without your brain, can't operate without your digestive processes, your elimination processes, your breathing processes. We're a holistic mix. We're miracle workers, all of us. Our bodies, how are more people not dead? Seriously, with what we do with our bodies and what we expose ourselves to and the choices we make, our bodies keep going. That's big.
And it's the reason they can keep going is because when we do some toxic things to ourselves, there are a ton of other cells which can pitch in and help out, and that's cooperation. And actually, just to bring up the big C word, cancer, a beautiful man by the name of Zach Bush, triple board certified doctor, used to create chemotherapy drugs, so he knows what he's talking about. And he describes the cancer cells as lonely. And it actually kind of makes a lot of sense just on the surface alone. When you think about what a cancer cell is, it's something that just rapidly divides, goes crazy and rapidly divides. Well, if the cell forgets that it's a part of a community and loses its connection to everything, it literally becomes the center of its own universe.
That's what a tumor is, right? In the body.
Oh, exactly. And as that cancer cell isn't connected to anything, thinks it's the center of the universe and thinks it has to do everything itself, well, of course it's going to go crazy because it's not connected to anything and it has to create more or else there's no life. But when a cell is connected to the entire community, it doesn't have to do all the work. It doesn't have to go insane. It doesn't have to be the center of the universe. There's other things taking care of other things. And so it doesn't have to divide like crazy because it realizes it's in a community. So think about, and the easiest kind of metaphor for this, if we lived in tribes, when you're part of the tribe, you only have to contribute 1/50th, let's say, of the work if you live with 49 other people. But if they kick you out and you have to do everything yourself, what mode do you go into? Complete survival, do everything yourself, ravage everything because you have to keep yourself alive. Kind of starts to sound like a cancer cell. So
but also that tribe is living on the planet and living in connection with Mother Earth and in connection with the seasons and the sky, the weather. And there were so many beautiful connections that have been lost. Which is how we become separated and we feel like we're on our own and we don't understand how life works anymore and the earth look what we've done to the earth. So just on that point,
Yeah.
more than that interpersonal communication or community is the vast all around us. How do we bring
Yeah.
all of that in so that we can use it and work together? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, so we figured out a lot of things way back. The one of the most epic quotes, "As within, so without."
Right.
Again, it seems inherently trivial, but it's so pervasive in life.
It is.
And it gets related to the idea of life being a fractal, meaning if you think about on the cellular level, like a super small level, it's community and cooperation. Then when you go to your organ systems, a little bit bigger, it's community and cooperation. Then when you go to human beings, it's community and cooperation. Then you go into nature and it's all community and cooperation. So it's like, doesn't matter what level that you're looking at kind of in this whole life system, it literally will always come back to community and cooperation. Because ultimately, the more things or people you have working on something together, the better it's going to be, as long as you can kind of work together. That's kind of always going to be true. If you have 2 people working on a problem and 100 people are probably going to do a little bit, more to solve that problem. And so we can't get away from this kind of cooperation and community idea. And when we are connected, no wonder our health gets better, because that's what literally we are built off of.
Exactly. And, from my own practice of law, I learned this a lot many years ago, and that is the runaway jury. A jury that everyone thinks one way produces terrible law, terrible results often, and which makes bad law. So if you ever work in a boardroom, on a board, or any groups that work together in business, difficult as it can be, you want the variety, you want the continuum of opinions, experience, and wisdom, and you want to make everyone heard and understood and seen and valued, because you want all of that. It just creates better decisions overall. You'd have to learn how to work that, of course, but so again, variety and width and depth and breadth, right?
I think that's the real challenge and beauty of life at the same time, is when you have diversity and you all end up cooperating and fitting together like each like your own unique puzzle piece that is meant to be. And I wanted to share something. This kind of occurred to me. When you think about human evolution, we started out in, let's say in tribes, with probably a small amount of people. And then we gathered in bigger tribes. And then we, gathered in small townships and then cities. So we basically went from, not too long ago, having pretty small tribes, 50, maybe 100 people, hundreds of people. And then through a short amount of time in evolution, we get to New York City, which is like 20 million people packed in like one sidewalk. I think what we're doing is playing the cooperation game. We're bringing diverse, unique human beings closer together. And by doing that, we're forcing cooperation to occur. Now, if you go to, that's the thing. If you go to New York, you might feel there's a competitive vibe, but a competitive vibe, again, I think that serves as the placeholder, because you need resources as a human being. So like everyone's got to eat. So you need to get those to yourself. And if you haven't developed a cooperative symbiotic system that allows the diversity of 20 million people to cooperate properly, then of course you're going to kind of revert back to the competition so that everyone can survive. But we keep playing this game where we want to bring human beings closer and closer and closer together. And I honestly believe it's us playing the cooperation game on an insane, massive scale. How many human beings can we interconnect and still cooperate and make it work? Like when you actually look at human evolution, we're constantly looking to become more connected, more global. And when you actually think about, why that could be, is it something arising from the subconscious that we want to communicate, we want community, we want cooperation, and we keep pushing for bigger and bigger. Now, unfortunately, when you kind of shoot for the moon, like it's something like social media, and you try to connect with all the world at once, and you're not really prepared for it, obviously we're not going to be great at it, right? So I think this is why we're kind of finding some problems with it. And people even argue, are we built for that? I don't think that argue is kind of even relevant. I think we should try to connect with as much as we possibly can.
With rules.
With rules
and then guidelines and common sense and compassion, right?
We're just playing the game of how many people can we tie into one unified, coherent, cooperative, communal system.
That's good. You know what? I want you to talk for a second. There's something in here about adopting civility. So give me a second honestly, this book is brilliant.
Yeah, and so timely. Well, here's even another fractal. So when you work at a big company, you have individual people. You can think of those like cells in your body.
Right.
You have the different teams that they work on. You can think of those like organ systems, and then you have the overall company. It's like on sports teams, you have the individual players, then you have lines, and you have the team.
And again, it's chemistry.
Yeah.
It's the chemistry of the players that wins games and championships, not having a whole bunch of stars running around doing their thing, right?
Exactly.
You've experienced that, right?
Yeah, 100%. The power of unified people is breathtaking, and I've experienced that on the biggest scale at a music festival, when you have, again, you're celebrating diversity, but you're celebrating diversity by unifying. It's like it's inherently just the most electric, beautiful thing that I've ever experienced, and it's like the epitome of communal connection.
Found it.
Let's hear it.
And thank you for that. Yeah. I sent you those 2 pages today about the effect of music and being together, not necessarily to enjoy the music, but to be in the presence of other people experiencing the same thing you are. There's nothing like in the presence of other people. That speaks very strongly.
Yeah.
So here's something that Brene talks about, the practice of civility. Civility is claiming and caring for one's identity, needs, and beliefs without degrading someone else's in the process. Civility is about disagreeing without disrespect, seeking common ground as a starting point for dialogue about differences, listening past one's preconceptions, and teaching others to do the same. Civility is the hard work of staying present, even with those with whom we have deep-rooted and fierce disagreements. It is political in the sense that it is a necessary prerequisite for civil action, but it is political too, in a sense that it is about negotiating interpersonal power such that everyone's voice is heard and nobody is ignored. I thought that was the most beautiful definition of civility, which if we all practice that in our interactions with one another, despite the fact that we disagree or don't like things. And she also talks in here about dehumanizing, which is what we do with factions and people that we don't like, is in order to be congruent with violence and criticism, we have to dehumanize that person or that faction in order to deliver our vitriol. And I just thought, yep, that's exactly what we do. Anyway.
Yeah.
We've gone down such a different road today, but
but it really is all under one belt, because if we're going to talk about community and cooperation, well, we're all unique, diverse human beings. And, this is, I think, one of the tough parts when we run into this with democracy and like the round table idea, is that we want all human beings to be equal and we all want our voices to be heard. But that has to happen in some sort of like a coherent fashion. And I think that's, like the ultimate kind of civil liberty is the fact that we can all kind of express ourselves freely. Like the idea of freedom of speech it's fundamentally saying we can express ourselves freely. It's a beautiful thing, and it's something which needs to be maintained. It just gets very difficult when we're trying to do it with, large swaths of people.
Well, it is. Yeah. And when you cross over into hurting others with your opinion and your objections and whatever it is, way you want to distance yourself, freedom of speech then is not good.
I don't want to go back on what I've said, but it's one of the things that I've thought a lot about in our world is, just thinking about, let's say, because I thought about like even kind of myself, and with, disagreeing with people, it's what I'm trying to get at. We have a big enough world that we don't necessarily all have to live together if we really don't choose. And
agree. We don't have to agree. There's a way that we can agree to disagree and go have a freaking beer, right? That's the way it should be.
True. Yeah. And I think that the tough part of that is we almost got to draw a line. Like there are certain things that we kind of almost need to agree on, like and I think that's kind of where law comes from, like the safety things. But as long as you and I can more or less agree and we want each other to continue to live and to be happy and to be healthy, anything idealistic after that, we should be able to, to kind of talk about and be open about and express ourselves about. And I think, like she mentioned in the book, be open and receptive to someone else's ideas, like actually listening, like we don't know everything. It's so tough.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's Adam Grant's book, Think Again. Oh my God, another beautiful tome I just finished a couple months ago.
One of the scary things that this was just kind of from listening like the Joe Rogan podcast, this really introduced me to it, and it seemed to be a really big issue in the past couple of years. Was the idea of when someone, like when you really radically disagree with someone, you try to kind of deplatform them, and you don't want them to have like a conversation with them, and you don't want them to be heard. And this reached the epitome in our Canadian federal debate when the NDP leader, and I'm sorry I forget his name, but he tried to have the leader of the People's Party of Canada like deplatformed from the debate because he thought that this man was purporting a hateful view on immigration. Now, beside whatever the leader of the People's Party of Canada was putting forward, it really turned me off to this leader of the NDP party, because just because you radically disagree with someone, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed to speak, even if they are purporting hate. In fact, if they are purporting hate, you want that person to speak so that you can identify where the hateful people are. Right. Anyway, I think it really brought to a head where even on a global, like we're talking international scale of the leaders, they're still human beings. And to see that kind of played out even at that federal level in the debate, it really hit home that this is an issue that as all human beings we're kind of being faced to deal with, and that how do we genuinely be open and respectful to other people's opinions, even if we radically agree or disagree. Again, it's tough, but it's a skill.
It is, but it's about finding common ground first, and not dehumanizing or depersonalizing somebody, because it's harder to be cruel when you're looking at somebody. Very much.
It absolutely is.
And Brene Brown talks about going to the women's freedom rally in Washington a couple of years ago, and she noticed this about a couple of the speakers, and that is they went from this platform of we're all one, and here's what we represent and how beautiful life is, but then the focus went from the topic to the speaker when suddenly the speaker started saying, and this is who we hate.
Yeah.
And it just brought the energy down. It changed the tenor of all that had been accomplished with that kind of vitriol. And I wasn't there, but I've heard. I'm a part of a political party here, and I keep saying, let's focus on what we do. Let's focus on how we're here to help. Let's focus on our job and what are our guidelines and our ideals and what do we stand for, and stop with the so-and-so is doing this wrong and this is garbage and as usual this was bad. Nobody wants to hear that anymore. We're tired of that kind of conversation and vitriol. Really, it's my new word for today, vitriol. So yeah, and the more we look at, here's what we are, not what we aren't, and who's with me on this. How can you go wrong?
Yeah, the thought leaders that I've really taken to recently, just to mention his name again, Zach Bush, do a wonderful job of painting the picture of the future, right, and not criticizing what's happened in the past.
Right.
And I think in a little bit of this, when we're talking about how do we move forward with human beings, genuinely painting the picture of how we can move forward in that cooperative kind of communal way. So even the kind of ironic thing, which I picked up as I was talking, was even as you and I are talking about, here's how human beings can go wrong, we're kind of in our own way telling a little bit of the story and kind of moving that for a little bit of like, oh, here's what us human beings and other people kind of do wrong. They're like, it just,
it's judgmental for sure.
It is. And it's so hard not to do because it's something we all experience so vividly, but
it's a way to identify what's happening, right?
Totally. But I think you and I can probably both agree that the conversations you and I love having best and the ones we love listening to are the ones which simply stick on the beautiful picture of the future which tell the story of what could be. And obviously, what could be involves the cooperation and the kind of communal aspect of human beings, not drawing lines and borders between human beings. And it's really, really tough to stay on that path of here's what we want to see, not here's the hateful people that we need to avoid and we need to take them out, but here's what we want to build and include for the future. And what I find the most powerful leaders in the world do are the ones which paint the picture of the future. It's not something, but it's pro-love, it's pro-community. And then what happens is human beings gather around that ideal, and it almost proves out the idea of what the leader was saying. They didn't have to say, not that. All they had to do was point their compass in the direction of the love, the community, whatever it is. And when human beings naturally gravitate to it, that's like running the experiment and proving that that is the strongest thing. Put your compass on gold.
Three figures in the past came to mind readily and easily, and that is Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, me too.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
And Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
Look at what they created with mindset, with envisioning peace and love and gratitude and harmony. They were all punished for it in some way.
Yeah.
But because of their light and their dedication to the higher principles of life, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Yeah.
The needle was moved. The needle was moved.
Yeah, it so was.
There's evidence for it. There's evidence to support that works.
Exactly. They proved out the model that you don't have to fight the bad. You simply need to keep the attention on the good. And
here's the thing though. And I've had this conversation a couple times recently, very interestingly, and that is, people talk about you have to bring awareness to the fact that there exists something in life that isn't good. There's bullying, or people are being hurt just for being who they are. And I look at, for example, the women's suffragette movement. Until women banded together, took to the streets, protested, rallied, marched, stood up for women's rights, was that needle going to move? I don't know. I don't think so. Now, it's how you do it. It's how you do it, right? So I think it comes down to bringing awareness, speaking out, solidifying a unified front. But I think it's the tone and how you do that will move the needle in the right direction, without the violence, without the recriminations, without treading on other people's ideals and so on.
I'm not so familiar with the movement, but I assume that the entire movement wasn't fighting men. And perhaps
it kind of was.
Was that the most successful part of the movement? And I only ask because I think what you're getting at is you first have to be honest at identifying what isn't working, or else you can't fix it.
Right.
But then where do you turn your attention? And if it stays on the problem, can you really find the solution?
Right.
So it's the Einstein quote, you can't solve the problem with the same level of thinking that created it.
Right.
However, that also doesn't mean that you have to be naive to all of life's problems. And this is one of the things that, I'll bring up meditation again. I know I've talked about it in the past, but what I've learned from Andy Patton, co-founder of Headspace, monk for 10 years, monks really get really, 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 really good at sitting with discomfort. And they get comfortable in uncertainty and chaos. So basically what that means is when something isn't quite working, when they feel the discordance with life or anything, or when we do as people, it's not about just kind of blindly putting your head in the sand and turning your attention away, because that makes you naive. That's like anti-wisdom.
Or we numb in so many ways. That's
or
what
we numb.
Does. Yeah.
Exactly. But instead it's first identifying that it is the problem, but can you at the same time identify the problem and turn your attention to the solution? And I think that's kind of where the magic lies. So when we're talking about kind of painting the picture of the beautiful future, it's not in any way of being naive to the problems of the past, but it's how do you move forward from those problems? And kind of like tug of war, if you're still tugging on that rope, well, then the game's going to continue and persist. So to kind of bring this back, because I'm sure we're probably near coming up on the time, although I can't even tell, to be quite honest. When we're really in this, especially kind of day and age and time, talking about cooperation and community, it is, I think, so easy right now to get really angry and paint the picture of what not only as people are doing wrong, but as society. And I think it's at least worth a shot of spending some of our energy in trying to paint the picture of what does a communal cooperative future entail. I can tell you from at least my limited experience on this planet, it's probably not getting angry at other human beings and forcing them to do things. That probably isn't going to work for everybody. And I only bring that up because I think right now there's a little bit of tension. There seems to be a lot of what do we want other people to do. However, neither here nor there, when we can spend a little bit of our energy creating that future where we are cooperative, where we can rely on other human beings and we feel connected to something greater than us, whether it is nature, whether it is other human beings, the globe at large, whatever it is, I think in that future sense of community and cooperation, we're going to find the golden magic, and we're going to find the intelligence to solve problems, intelligence that we didn't even know existed. And by the way, talking about life as a fractal, that is exactly what happens on the microbiome in the nature level. When the microbiome, or when the bacterial diversity in your gut becomes diverse enough, there becomes this kind of over global intelligence. And this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but you actually develop this kind of hyper intelligence in your gut when enough diverse species can find a way to work together. It's
Wow.
like it's a quantum kind of jump.
Wow.
Yeah. And so again, life is the fractal kind of in part of that. So as within, so without. As human beings, if we can find a way to live in that beautiful cooperative future with each other, it's almost a foregone conclusion that we will find conclusions. The power of multiple human beings just gets exponential as we go. So in that cooperative future of ours, we're going to think of things that we can't think of right now without it. And we're going to look back and think, why didn't we think of that before? We were missing the community.
We weren't ready. We just weren't
Already.
ready. And so we can end this today by saying, what would you rather think about? You know, do I want to spend my time thinking about being angry, thinking about other angry people or sad people or beaten down people? Or do I feel better in my body, in my mind, in my soul? Do I feel better thinking about what could be, where people are communicating and living communally and practicing higher ideals to be together, to live the highest life that we're really meant here to live? I'd rather think about the latter, not the former.
And to be a little bit cheesy, but I think to kind of bring it full circle.
Let's end it on cheese, Scott. Let's end it on cheese.
Send it on cheese. Be the change I want to see in the world. We started out this conversation talking about how, as social communal beings, we are as mammals, as human beings, with our social engagement system. When there is that one person who's giving off the cues of safety, they found stability in life, they found love for themselves, whatever it is, they found peace in their creation of their future. That is the best story to go for on. It's the most solid that human beings can move forward on. So naturally, that is the cue which our bodies are just craving to find, if we can't in ourselves, in someone else. So in that, be that change you want to see in the world, you then literally embody that change that you want to see in the future. And then other human beings gravitate towards that because it's just a better, more sustainable state of being. And so when it's attractive. Yeah. So as we co-regulate each other with our voice, with our faces, the more that we can embody this beautiful future that we want, genuinely, it's going to entrain other beings to that higher vibration mode state of being. You want to talk about health, you want to talk about immunity, something that we all need right now. I think that's the way forward.
Beautiful way to end this, my friend. Beautiful way.
Awesome.
And so let's give our neighbors and people we pass a look in the eye and a smile, a handshake, or at least an elbow bump, or whatever it is we're doing. Let's get out there in the sun, in the fresh air. We're getting into summer now. Get outside, breathe in the fresh air, expand your lungs, but at the same time, be open to expressions from other people, and give your love at the end of the day. Just give the best love that you can, and it'll come back tenfold.
Yeah, express your love, exactly, and it comes back tenfold. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Scott. This hour has flown, and I love that we don't work from a script. We didn't talk about what we thought we were going to today, but that's the way this thing works. So for all of you who have watched or listened or joined us, thank you for your interest. Thank you for wanting to know, for being curious. And of course, if you're here, you were meant to be here, and you're already participating in being that light for the world, which we talked about today. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Scott. It's been a beautiful hour, and I'll see you next month. Have a good one.
Fantastic. You too.